so should we move on to gender identities and God's view on marriage?
Yep, please.
Okay.
It's probably more complicated and challenging.
Yeah.
I actually do have some questions on this.
There's just so much stuff, like, within this category. I don't know. There's so much research that I couldn't comprehend, but, like, basically I found, like, Trump wants to cut the current federal funding for gender-affirming care, restrict transgender students' participation in sports, stuff like that. I also saw some stuff on the vice presidents about J.D. Vance, which is Trump's vice president, was saying that he, like, disagreed with students sharing bathrooms that, like, in schools. And then, obviously, Tim Walz agrees they should be allowed to share bathrooms. Just kind of things like that.
He kind of initiated or championed some of the most progressive legislation about transgender rights in Minnesota as governor there. So that's kind of his background in particular.
Kamala is, quotations from the internet, the most pro-LGBTQ administration in the U.S. history.
Yeah.
I wrote down, Biden changed the Respect for Marriage Act from a man and a woman to two individuals. Another piece I have is that taxpayers would pay for sex changes of prisoners that want to transition. These are just some of the many points that you can look. There's so much stuff out there on the internet, but there's
and also allowing teachers to talk to their students about whether or not they want to be a boy or a girl.
Yeah, that's sort of what I referenced the last politics one about the folks in foster adoption. And the care for them.
Yes.
So again, neither of you asked any questions yet, but I'm just going to say a couple things.
Yeah, go for it.
Things that matter. So I think the Harris-Walz Democratic ticket platform is progressive in the sense of supporting almost all LGBT, agenda items. I think Trump is pushing back on the transgender front relative to, men and women's sports and relative to affirming care for minors, which ironically, there's a lot of stuff in the news now about a couple of European countries that were kind of some of the leaders and most progressive in these areas that are already pushing back related to hormone therapy and different things for minors. There's a really tremendous book, I'll think of it and say it later, about Irreversible Damage is the name of the book, about the challenge for particularly young women relative to transgenderism. So there's a lot of like research and my sense is a little bit of a cultural push back against those things, and Trump is on that side of it, and Kamala and Walz are still on the side of progressive. I just want to say, since the topic is kind of like marriage, gender, etc., again, neither candidate, in my opinion, is at what I would think of as a even historic biblical position, which is one man, one woman, married for life.
Right.
And so you have lots of what I would call like sexual challenges around both candidates' individual lives. So Kamala Harris's husband admitted to having an affair with his nanny in his first marriage. Trump is on wife number 3, various allegations at least of sexual misconduct. And so, again, for kind of the second topic, I wouldn't describe it as like one has the Christian position and one doesn't.
Correct.
I would say that
It's a lesser
Trump's
of two evils.
it's a lesser of two evils is probably a better way when thinking about their platforms and lifestyles as they relate to historic Christian views on these matters. And so, again, kind of the same thing in a way as the abortion issue is like, I am not the kind of Christian or pastor who says like, makes fun of or mocks or tries to or belittles or like arrogantly walks all over people who either experience or have these alternative views on sexuality. They are like the aborted babies, made in the image of God, and I want to treat them with respect and dignity as such.
Yeah.
I disagree with the validity of that lifestyle, and there's a lot of stuff to talk about. I preached here once on transgenderism, that one of the fatal flaws with it, in my opinion, is it's inherently self-focused. It basically says the most important thing about me is my gender, and I have to have everybody else pay very close attention to my gender, which means everybody has to pay very close attention to me, which is the shortest pathway to being miserable, because anytime we're self-focused and not others-focused, we get miserable. And so there's a thing there. One other thing I wanted to mention is there's a website called the Center for Faith, Sexuality, and Gender that I really have grown to appreciate. It holds to the Christian traditional views, but talks a lot about how people, you're a parent and your kid says that they're gay. What's the Christian response to actually that situation? Right. Not just like, is this right or wrong, but how do we walk through the complexities of actually doing life with these people? Yeah. And so that website, that organization, Center for Faith, Sexuality, and Gender, I go to as a resource for not just the beliefs of what's right and wrong, but how to navigate the complexities in real life of these things.
Those are really real questions.
Mm-hmm. Right, and lots of people are facing that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
My friend does this, my coworker does this, they want to change it, how do I do all that kind of stuff? So, I guess relative to the politics and the questions you were asking earlier, do you have other questions about either party and kind of their views on those issues, or anything that we didn't touch on there that is important to you?
I feel like maybe the Democrats may argue something who cares? It doesn't affect you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Live and let live. Why can't we just, why do you need to make it a bigger deal than it actually is if it's not bothering you?
You can still be a Christian and do your thing, but let us do ours. Correct. Maybe something to that effect.
Yeah, that's a good.
How would we respond to that? Maybe.
It's a great question.
Or should we even be pushy on this issue?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, we might have talked about this in some other podcast tangentially. The biggest thing is the question in my mind is at that point is always what is actually love? Mm-hmm. And a lot of people think the definition of love is you accept me for who I am and are completely comfortable that I always stay exactly as I am. Mm-hmm. And if your relative was an alcoholic, we wouldn't say that. We would say you love them, but you want to say hey, maybe this AA thing would be helpful for you, because I don't think for your flourishing that it's going to be best for you to remain alcoholic for the rest of your life, And so it has to be done with, I think some level of tact and wisdom and these kinds of things. But I think, so one response is, I feel called to do the loving thing. And the loving thing means I'm going to risk you being annoyed at what I say, because I honestly think it's for your good. Mm-hmm. Now, you can disagree with me in that. I'm not going to punch you in the face if you disagree. That's going too far. Right. Another piece of that same thing is that I think we should, if we want people to flourish, again, in a way it goes back to the abortion thing, life is good, and a man and a woman can create life. That's how it is. Yeah. And kids are good. Our population is, I don't know if you guys know this or not, the population in America is, right now, trends are that we are not reaching a replacement value, meaning the population will decline because we're just not having enough kids to even keep the population stable. Mm-hmm. And so, not only that, kids who are raised in a house with a man and a woman, men and women are different, and they both bring different things. I stink at coddling a newborn compared to my wife. Mm-hmm. She doesn't do the same as I do when it goes to letting kids risk and encouraging them to do something beyond what's safe, and so, they'll tell you all about the story. But the point is that matters because we have a whole country full of people who are afraid of stepping into anything difficult, whether it's a conflict relationally or, to do something that puts them at any level of risk. And that's just no way to live a life, because you're always going to have to confront risky things, It's why is there anxiety everywhere? It's one of the things is, one piece of that, I think, is that we're not freeing our kids to experience risk in the ways that they could. So
You just to add to what you said there, like, I think there are really two reasons why people aren't having as many kids. One is a selfish view of, like, I just want to benefit, like, I want life to benefit me. I want to see where I can go with my career or whatever.
Interrupt you. Do you ever hear of DINK?
No.
DINK. It's like a whole thing.
Oh, yeah.
Dual income, no kids.
I've heard of
it's
that.
like, we're a DINK. We can do a lot of great things. Like,
never heard that.
To me, but it's also like, it's just, I mean, I understand some people can't have children for a certain reason, but what you lose out on is the forming fact of, like, there's a deep, meaningful love between you and the kids, but there's also, like, this thing that kids help us to become healthier people because we're less selfish because there's kids there, you know?
Yeah.
Good.
But I was going to say the second reason that people I don't think have kids now is fear. And this kind of ties into politics because, like people might argue, I don't want to have kids and raise them in this world.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question.
Me being one of those people.
Yeah, and I think the best. I mean, one of the primary response to that is the most commonly. It's not a new problem. The most commonly responded situation in command in the Bible is fear not. And the reason that's the most common command is because we tend to fear because we think we have to control everything ourselves, and the gospel says God has it under control and we get to God not because of what we did or how we earned or how good we are, that kind of stuff. So I think there's some gospel implications about that. But.
Yeah. I do have one question. I was talking to somebody about, like, gay, lesbian people, and they asked, don't you think, I know the answer to this, I feel, but I'm going to let you tell it. Do you think that God changes with the time?
That's a good question. Yeah, so God, I think the fancy word is immutable, if I can remember my seminary education, which is God is unchanging in character. So I don't think God changes with the time. This is actually really relates to especially the LGBTQ stuff because folks, there's a significant movement amongst people who, Christian people, who say that we misread the Bible. That was really speaking against the idea of, like, unhealthy homosexual relationships, not a monogamous, homosexual relationship. And one of my responses to that, there's a couple, but one of my responses to that is, like, just seems odd to me that when there was a lot of homosexuality in the first century, the church as a whole for, like, about 1900 years, almost every strand of Christianity thought homosexuality was wrong. And so, like, it just seems it's like all of a sudden that's like a new, that just doesn't feel authentic to me. Or another way to say it is, like, places like Africa, they are pushing more and more for, let's say, more traditional Christian views on these kinds of things, but it's only in certain places in the world, like the West, Europe and America, that people are asking those kinds of questions. So I think God, the passage would be like stays the same yesterday, today, and forever. But more than that, I think if you just pay attention to history, Christian history, a lot of these things have been, like, consistent over a long time, and then all of a sudden it's only changed relatively recently.